Ladies and gentlemen, to start today's show off with something which is going to be relevant for a portion of tonight's discussion, I shall play to you a video that has gone viral, arguably not for the best of reasons. Behold Donald John Trump answering a question on the military strikes / war, depending on who you ask, in Iran.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still
But
investigating?
the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran
Can you give us an
because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Now, I'm going to pause this and highlight. We're going to talk about Iran, the latest strikes, the Squad not voting for a resolution that would reaffirm that Iran is the largest global sponsor of terror. I want to highlight something in this. And I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of calling Trump a liar. People want to do that. That's fine. We are at the early stages of war, the fog of war. Undoubtedly, there's more intel that they have in terms of that strike that killed 100 plus girls in a school that was seemingly adjacent to an IRGC target. And the question is, whose missiles struck it? There is one element saying it was an American strike, a double tap, a first bomb, and then a first strike and a second strike. Then others are suggesting that it was an Iranian errant missile, and they're showing a 16-second clip video on the internet. No geolocation, no timestamp, no nothing, showing something going up and something coming down and striking the ground. You don't even know where, as if that undoubtedly settles the point that it was an errant Iranian missile. I'm not calling Trump a liar, and there's no but to that. What he said, and there's a reason why people speak the way they speak, is in his opinion based on what he's seen. Open to being changing that opinion depending on what comes from the investigation that Hegseth is currently undertaking, or is being undertaken according to Hegseth. The issue here, Trump says, it's in my opinion, it was Iranian missiles. And then the answer by Hegseth somewhat undermines that statement.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion.
Based on what I've seen.
Based on what I've seen. In my opinion, qualifier. Based on what I've seen, qualifier.
That was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth?
That's a little sneaky deaky reporter right there. Is that true? Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? Do you want to publicly undermine your boss right now at this moment?
Was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
We're certainly investigating it. The other element that I want to draw out, not for nothing, is what Hegseth says.
Still
But
investigating.
the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of people out there who have great disdain for America, who will say that's patently untrue. America targets civilians. And I was having this discussion with someone actually privately, and I would, not a debate about semantics, but suggest, like by the time America targets civilians, they're probably designated as enemy combatants or something along those lines. Does America target civilians? I mean, absolutely. Obama killed an American citizen via drone strike. Now, what the rationale for that was whatever. And whether or not you play semantics and say, well, if they've designated a civilian a legitimate military target, well, then they're no longer civilians. They are enemy combatants. Absolutely, historically, America has targeted civilians. It was part and parcel of what, was it Ed Snowden or Julian Assange? Collateral murder, where they either targeted journalists or targeted people knowing they were going to kill civilians and journalists, and it was a big flipping scandal. And then the question is, well, if they don't target civilians, but they take a strike knowing that civilians are going to get killed in it, that's 6 of one, half a dozen the other. That is a distinction without a difference. So when Hegseth says, yeah, only the Iranians target civilians, setting aside all of that, let's just even operate on the basis that when America does it, they're no longer civilians. They've determined they're enemy combatants, just for the sake of argument. And I know people are going to be freaking out about that. Doesn't matter. Targeting civilians versus indirectly or as a direct causal effect of waging the war, killing civilians, nobody can deny that historically, in these conflicts, the military machine kills civilians. I mean, it was the question that I say haunts Madeleine Albright's legacy to this day. Maybe she doesn't care. Maybe she still thinks that answer was okay. Is 250,000 dead Iraqi civilians worth the regime change in Iraq? And her answer was basically yes, it was worth it. Weren't her kids and whatever. So civilians get killed, whether or not you think they're being specifically targeted by America or tangentially, but with wanton disregard, whatever. The question here is, much like what we've seen in the Israel's operations in Gaza, you got to make sure that you either do your due diligence and you're sufficiently comfortable with relying on whatever information you have at that time, or be prepared to correct yourself or hold off coming to determinations. The bombing of the hospital in Gaza, I mean, there's still people to this day who believe the initial New York Times reporting that it was Israel who bombed it. And then there are people who refuse to believe that it was an errant missile being sent from Gaza into Israel that struck a hospital. The journalists who got exploded pretty much on video, that one becomes a little harder to deny. This is what the war is. This is the entire problem before you get involved in something at this level. Ostensibly, seemingly, although some people are going to argue this is not in violation, contradiction of what Trump ran on in 2024. The ultimate irony, people, I think, are circulating a clip, and chat, you will correct me if I'm wrong. The provenance of the clip in which Trump jokingly says maybe we should just bomb the shit out of them, being Iran. My understanding is that that particular clip is actually from 2016 and was not part of the national conversation in 2024. I might be wrong. These are the realities. Civilians will get killed. And to some and to many, it won't matter if it was even an Iranian errant missile or an American double tap strike because they didn't know that there was a school there, or they did and decided to go for the IRGC target regardless, knowing that there would be civilian casualties. I mean, the worst case scenario, which I do not believe and I do not espouse, but some people undoubtedly will, deliberate, and they want to instill terror in the Iranian regime in terms of how far they will go. I won't believe that. I mean, I know my banner on Twitter is no matter how cynical you get, it's hard to keep up. To many people, taking a strike, knowing you're going to kill civilians, even if it's a legitimate target, could be a war crime, could be a crime against humanity. And whether or not it's an Iranian errant missile, some people are going to say, but for the involvement, but for the intervention, this never happens. What is stunning in all of this, we're watching it in real time, is literally like out of George Orwell's 1984. In the middle of the speech, switching the script, and everybody's looking at the signs, and it's the wrong person on the signs, and everybody goes along with the new script. I'm having this discussion with people, and it's a very difficult discussion to have, especially online, because people are out there, as bad faith actors, just to insult and just to distract and just to pollute meaningful discourse. But I'm out there and saying, like, set aside how you feel about this particular. There could be people out there who say, yeah, I don't mind. I would have otherwise supported regime change in Iran. Set aside all of the facts that it just, historically has never really happened, or it has happened at great costs. And then whether or not the situation now is better than it was 20 years ago, 250,000 innocent Iraqi civilians ago, time moves on. And then, one death is a tragedy, 1 million deaths is a statistic, and then it just becomes part of the annals of history. Whether or not you support this war, and I can imagine some people do support regime change of this terrorist regime in Iran, the question is whether or not this is, on its face, something of a contradiction, something of a reversal, an about face of campaign promises, and then set aside success or failure on the mission, whether or not this is going to be politically compromising at home. And I have people saying, Viva, you're Canadian, shut your mouth. First of all, or you you fix your own country. Some people think I'm Canadian and don't understand. I've been living in America, in Florida, for the last 4 years. And I would dare say that I love this country more than at least a great many voices on the interwebs. And that I didn't just leave Canada. I actually ran for the federal government of Canada and decided to leave when it became clear that Canadians don't want to save themselves. And then somehow thinking, well, you're Canadian and therefore you're constantly anti-war, anti-interventionism. A, no, but B, I love this country. This administration needs to succeed, failing which you're going to go right back to a Joe Biden, a Kamala Harris, an Obama. And then the question is, what is going to maximize the likelihood of success of this administration is getting bogged down in it's not a forever war, Viva. It's not a forever war. This is not like Iraq. Everybody seems to forget. Iraq was declared mission accomplished 42 days after Operation Shock and Awe. Some people don't even remember what Operation Shock and Awe was. It was 2003. People weren't even born. Some people weren't even born. Some people lived through it and saw, something similar to what we're seeing right now. I had somebody tell me on the internet, Viva, this is different. This is a different administration. It's a different country. It's a different time. It's like, yeah, there's a reason why the expression is history doesn't repeat, but it tends to rhyme. And the moving targets of the justification is what's very difficult to square, in that it's not a war, but it is a war. It's going to be a short war, but it's going to be another 3 or 4 months. It's nothing like Iraq. Maybe it's not like Iraq for reasons that are not favorable, like it's a much larger country than Iraq with a much larger population, many more factions that might resort to fighting. No. This is to liberate the Iranian people is one excuse. And then you have to say, well, how are you liberating the Iranian people by bombing oil refineries and desalination plants? And then you have people saying, well, the military needs it. It's an inconvenience that the population is going to have to put up with. And then you're going to say, well, how long is the population going to put up with having their critical infrastructure devastated for the purposes of regime change? And ironically enough, and not for nothing, when Ukraine blew up that bridge, or when the Nord Stream pipeline got blown up, and you're like, well, that's an attack on civilian infrastructure. That's when Ukraine did it. It was a big point of contention among the right. And all of a sudden now, yeah, you can destroy their oil refineries because the military needs it. Yeah, you can go blow up desalination plants because the military needs it. And this moving goalpost of not having consistent standards for this type of conduct and not learning from a history that tends to rhyme. 42 days after Operation Shock and Awe, when everyone was glued to their television, watching buildings blow up in Iran, exactly like they're looking at that warship being blown up, in Iraq, much like they're watching that warship be blown up in Iran, much like they're watching the oil refinery burn and saying, this is what I voted for. It certainly rhymes. And then you get people saying, now that we're in it, if you don't get behind it, well, then, you're traded to the country. As if America was founded on the idea that you don't criticize the government when you think they deserve to be criticized. As if America was founded on the idea that the voice of the people should be spoken, if only to ensure that you don't fall back on a government that is exponentially worse than the opportunity that Trump has had now to save this country. And so all that to say, if people who can't understand the difference between constructive criticism and legitimate, historically justified skepticism resort to the gaslighting, the name-calling, and the pollution of the public discourse. And you can always provide feedback to minimize what you sincerely believe to be a potential misstep. That I don't know what victory looks like on the military front, even how you envision that over what time frame, but you certainly know what political defeat is going to look like in the immediate term. There was a classic line from, not to unfortunately put any one person on blast in particular, but this is the mentality that people don't seem to understand. Looks entitled's not even the word. Heartless, idiotic, un-American. Luke Rudkowski says, I didn't sign up to have my tax dollars pay for this. This is not a one-off sentiment of people who were among the biggest Trump administration, Trump supporters on earth. To which James Lindsay, anti-communist, says, go over there and protest it. To which I say, telling an American to go to a foreign country to protest his tax dollars being used to fund a foreign war is not making the point you thought you were making. There was another one, which, you can't have these discussions on the internet because they don't go anywhere useful. Another person said, if the people who oppose the war now, if they were on our side during 1776, we'd all be speaking British or, with a British accent. I was so tempted to reply, but it's not a reply that can be fully fleshed out in a tweet. Like, the 1776 revolution was at least part and parcel about paying taxes to a foreign country, or it was foreign, paying taxes to England to the detriment of the American colonies so that England could go and do its conquests, expand throughout the world, build its empire. That was the very reason of the 1776 revolution. Some might argue that whether or not, if you think this makes America safer, and that's going to be your argument, fine. But I don't think it's legitimate to call anybody a traitor to 1776 principles, which were about objecting to a foreign governing body taking your tax pot dollars for their global empirical conquest. And it sure as shit was not so that they could tell you to shut up. Right now, the thing to do is shut up. If you think you're going to build a coalition, maintain a coalition by telling those with legitimate grievances and dissent to shut up and sit down, are you expecting them to get up and vote come 2026? And then if the Democrats take over, and then what happens? Then impeachments, and then potential convictions, and then more lawfare, and then not just threatening and on the verge of locking people up, they'll do it. If you allow a mistake to be made that does irreparable damage to this administration, this movement, and allows the divide and conquer of the far left, a division which has been self-inflicted, and then you only pray that it ends up well or not horrible. In 2026, Trump did promise to bomb the shit out of Iran. That's right. That's 10 years ago. And that clip that people are circulating, the other discussion I was having is some people would probably have supported this type of interaction, involvement, had it been part of the discussion in 2024. You might have actually had people support this regime change, whatever you want to call it, if it had been part of the discussion and not contrary to the discussion in 2024. But bomb the shit out of Iran in 2016 is not a clip that you can use in 2024 to say it's always been on the table. It wasn't part of the national conversation. Had it been, the outcome might have been the same, but the outcome might have been different. You might have actually gotten a Kamala Harris elected, as bad as that would have been, if only because she said, well, I don't want to go to war with Iran. Or she might have said, I'll go to war with Iran too. And then in which case, it's a wash. You're still going to vote for Trump. Oh, so that's that. We're going to get into this when Barnes gets in here in a few seconds. What I want to do before we get into anything, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. This is the Sunday night show with Robert Barnes. If I pissed off anybody in the chat, just wait until Barnes gets in here. And if you're pissed off by words and theories and thoughts and the insights of people you choose to watch, you might want to question your life decisions and your life sensitivities. We are live on the Sunday night show across all platforms. During the week, I'm live daily at 3 o'clock on Rumble and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And tomorrow, I was going to say James Lindsay. It's not James Lindsay. Michael Tracy, whom I've been having a back and forth with on the Epstein files. He's coming on. And we're going to finally, I say duke it out. We're going to have our Viva Voce discussion about the Epstein files and what I believe is him. I'm going to ask him everything. I said, I'm not an asshole. It's not going to be an ambush. I'm going to ask you the exact same questions I've been asking you online. And we're going to discuss what evidence of what wrongdoing there has been from the Epstein files, with the ultimate joke. Say it's a cynical joke that nobody's talking about the Epstein files anymore. What I was going to do is see what's going on over at vivabarneslaw. Oh, that's right. If I miss your super chats, Miss Scusi, and don't be angry. I actually forgot that I didn't even open the window for us being live on CommuTube on the backdrop. CommuTube is whatever. It's unfortunately it's still the biggest bullhorn. I use it to remind everybody, come to vivabarneslaw.locals.com and come over to Rumble, the free speech platform. If I miss your super chats, do not get angry with me. Is Barnes in the chat here? Oh, Barnes, you're in. You're on the left. Okay, hold on. This drives me crazy. You might still be muted.
Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you. I was watching. I was like, oh, look at that. I must have pulled up an old episode on YouTube. Robert, how goes the battle, sir? I was going to say, if we miss any of your super chats on CommuTube, Rumble rants on Rumble, or tipped questions in Viva Barnes Law, we get to all of those. I'll do my best. If I miss them, do forgive me. Robert, sir, what's the book that you have behind you today, sir? What's the drawing over there? What's the thing above your head, Robert?
Yeah, they might have a common theme. That 1776 Law Center, which is done by a board member, a great little mini quilt. And there's on top, there's a cup that's for the America's 250th anniversary. I think Trump has chosen a peculiar way to celebrate that at the moment. The 1776 magazine, David McCullough, 1776 book. That's a great art piece by also another board member in honor of 1776. So even if the president isn't gonna, celebrate 1776 in a 1776 kind of way, there's no reason why we can't.
Robert, we've got a bunch of stuff on the menu tonight. The reason why I did bring something up is I wanted to see what was over here, which we got. MK Telephone Man says desalination plants should be off limits for humanitarian reasons. Electronic jamming can make a missile miss. No question. And then the other thing was I was going to bring up over on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, just to get a few of these. See, we go like this, tip questions over here. And for the Bill Brown was right again, Jar says Chris Kraft, $50. Thank you, Chris Kraft. Gray 101. What are the odds Operation APAC Fury? See, now okay. That's funny though. I have not heard that one, Gray 101. So that's it's called Operation Epic Fury for those who don't get the play on words. Stingray says, "Oh, Daniel Davis deep dive show. They said that Israel is using AI and it is choosing targets in Iran. No human input except to cancel a strike. Be surprised about that. Using military strikes is like doing surgery with a meat cleaver. If the CIA wasn't busy spying on U.S. citizens, they could have gone and done things to prevent an all-out war. Imagine paying an Iranian to cause their ammo depot to blow up from the inside." Excuse me, Robin, I'm choking on my... what do we have on the menu for tonight?
So we've got the top topic voted on at vivabarneslaw.locals.com is the issues related to the Iran war. On the legality side, the various War Powers Acts that went before the House and the Senate this past week, what those entailed, what those legally authorize or do not, whether or not any of these acts have been impeachable, whether in terms of the president or in terms of Secretary of War Haig's death. Apparently his name was missing a D in it. And that would involve the war crimes, whether war crimes have been committed. There's a range of debate out there about that in terms of the recent attack on the frigate coming back from India. What is a war crime under U.S. law? What is a war crime under other law? Because we have previously prosecuted war crimes, including the Germans, the Brits did it as well, for considered just Kogan's principles, law of war principles, law of nations principles, which people may not remember. I mean, you have Jared over at Stephen Crowder, who doesn't think international law exists. Apparently, he skipped reading the Constitution of the United States because it's referenced right in there. It's called the Law of Nations. So we have all of those related issues. Then we have the SAVE Act. What exactly does it do? It doesn't have some things that Trump put in it. Folks will talk about that. It has some other provisions, but will it even pass? The Grifty Christie, no bid Noem, out. I say some of us, I can't lie. I hear you, I hear others, and then I absorb what information I think is best. Right again, Robert. Right again, for the very same reasons that nobody had been publicly mentioning. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Until that hearing on Tuesday, we'll get there. Correct. And what are the potential longer term consequences? Is the administration completely out of risk by getting rid of her as a secretary cabinet, or does her continued role in the administration at some level mean that the risk continues? The various Daily Caller, like Luke Rosiak, others are doing investigations. And in that same capacity, New York Times did, I think it was New York Times, did a big expose on pay-for-play Pam Bondi having a pay-for-play pardon scheme with Donald Trump Jr. friend Arthur Schwartz, who's in bed with Mike Davis at corrupting the Justice Department and the Antitrust Division as well. The corruption scandals are just beginning to pop open. The SCOTUS, we had 3 decisions from SCOTUS, one on asylum law, one on state immunity, and one on trans and kids and schools. So we'll cover that trilogy. Trump tariffs, refunds, what's the refund decision, and have his new tariffs been challenged in ways, unfortunately, we might have predicted just last week. The refugees in the Ninth Circuit, what is the law? Does the president have carte blanche in the ways that the Constitution and Congress would have seemed to intend? Or can the various judges just step in and say, no, we overrule you? Big Ninth Circuit decision on that. Meta. Remember those glasses that they promised are completely private?
Predictably shocking and absolutely. I was actually thinking of getting them because I want to record my bowling. Absolutely not now. But then I guess our phones are no different anyhow. So yeah, not private, by the way.
The TikTok sale now being contested in court. The DEI on campus struck down by a Biden appointee, no less, in the state of California as unconstitutional. including compelled speech, including compelled pronoun use. A psychic that said someone was guilty of serial killer murder apparently did not foresee their own loss in a libel suit.
And I know why you like that one is because it puts Candace Owens on notice for what she has been saying to some degree, a greater or lesser degree. We'll talk.
The Uber tried to use the First Amendment to circumvent any obligation to protect its workers. That lost in court. Winter gummies, sleep gummies, not all natural like they were claiming. That suit went forward in court. And then Kalshi is battling out various state cases about what is and isn't gambling and what is and isn't preempted by federal law. So that's the docket tonight on Law for the People.
Well, let's start on the one that's going to piss off as many people in the crowd as it pleases. We're going to start with Iran. Robert, first question before we even get into Thomas Massey's resolution. The 53 Democrats who voted against the resolution to reaffirm that Iran is the world's, the global leader in state-sponsored terrorism, that they've been responsible for targeting and killing American servicemen and women across, the globe and the Middle East in particular. 53 refused to sign it. It was they say a non-binding. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? The type of resolution where it's not purely. What is it? The question
known
is this:
as virtue signaling.
Virtue of the legislative method. Now, but what do you? So it has the resolution itself would have no power other than reaffirming what has already been stated. The voting against it has no power other than indicating where your, I won't say loyalties lie, but where your principles lie. Do you judge the Democrats who voted no on it in the same as badly as others out there have, and as badly as I think they deserve to get judged for it?
Well, the key problem is our own State Department report. If you go through where the terrorism has come from, would not have Iran even in the top 5. So you have that problem. If they're the leading sponsor of terrorism, in the Middle East is named Israel, not Iran. So that's my view on it. Larry Johnson has done a deep dive on this. Others have done a deep dive on this. It's been propaganda for a long time. But if you look at our own State Department, most terrorism comes from in terms of non-state actors. And to the degree you're going to say a government supports those non-state actors. I mean, it wasn't Iran that was implicated in 9/11. It was Saudi Arabia that was implicated in 9/11, which we're still hiding, still covering up. Why? Because most of the terrorism comes from Sunni Islamic sects, not from Shia Islamic sects. And that's the problem. So the main argument against Iran has been concerning their support of Hezbollah and their support of the Palestinian resistance movement. But the Palestinian resistance movement, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Fatah, whether it's PLO, whether it's Islamic Jihad, there's a range of groups that have had power at different times and points, are still a Sunni Islam rooted movement. And so it's going to have more subsidy and support from the Sunni Islamic world than the Shia Islamic world. So that's, we've sort of, propagandized the heck out of the West that Iran is this big sponsor of all the terrorism around the world. It's just not true, to be honest with you. Go using the State Department's own data.
Well, when
they list who is a terrorist group, where they get support from, what you'll find is that that Iran is not the number one sponsor of most of those groups because most of those groups are Sunni. Well, in terms of Islamic terrorism.
Well, no, and I could hear people in the internet screaming of what you said about Israel, because unless the argument is that Israel finances or allows for the financing of Hamas, is
well, it depends on how you define terror. If you define terror as targeting civilian populations for the purposes of achieving a political objective, using methods to terrorize them, Israel's killed more civilians than any other nation in the Mideast.
Well, I highly doubt
just because of Gaza.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think the State Department has designated Israel as a terrorist organization. They got Cuba, Iran, North Korea.
But we shift our definitions depending on how we want to use it politically. But there is a State Department. Larry Johnson went through it and showed how, for example, take even blaming the 1983 bombing of the Beirut, where our Marines, I believe our Marines were located. That was by a Shia sect of Lebanon. That was a Shia militia group that predated the existence of the Iranian Islamic Republic. So that's the problem with sort of blaming Iran for a lot of those things. The number one fighter and opponent of ISIS was Iran. Iran did more damage to ISIS than we ever did. So that's where a lot of this propaganda, I'm not a fan, to be clear, of the Islamic regime of Iran, but pretending that they are the number one reasons for terrorism around the world it's been false now for quite a while.
So the resolution would be irrelevant one way or the other. You draw no broader conclusions from the refusal to sign it. I say if it's reaffirming something, and I do appreciate the argument that they think Trump would then use it as some sort of legal precedent or predicate for the war, which I don't think is tenable even as an excuse to not sign it. Okay, so set that aside. If we pull up Thomas Massey's, this is the current resolution, right? This is House of Representatives directing presidents.
HR 38.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. And this one basically says Congress has the sole power to declare war under Article 1. Congress has not declared war with respect to yada, yada. Section 5C War Powers Act states that at any time the United States armed forces are engaged in hostilities, ... without a specific declaration of war, such forces shall be removed by the president if Congress so directs. And the Section 2, which is going to piss a lot of people off, coming from Massey in particular, pursuant to Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution, Congress hereby directs the president to terminate the use of the United States Armed Forces from hostilities against the Islamic Republic of Iran or any part of its government or military unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or specific authorization for use of military force against Iran. The rationale here, Robert, as far as I understand it, and you'll explain to the Canadian Chinook who one day might be a master of constitutional law. I'm joking. The idea here is that the carve-out or the workaround for this provision of authorizing war by Congress is that imminent threat, imminent risk, and the argument was that Iran, not to stir up any debate in the chat, Iran was imminently going to strike, if not America, Israel, and that America then was required to intervene, and therefore this was bypassing the otherwise statutory requirements for a declaration of war via Congress. And Massey says no, and in as much as that was ever the excuse in the beginning, it's not now past this resolution and cease the hostilities unless Congress authorizes. Is that sufficiently accurate? And what happened with this resolution?
So, yeah, and there was also Senator Rand Paul that proposed a similar one in the Senate. It doesn't authorize the president's use of force. It attempts to make clear it's an illegal use of force. So there were some people that interpreted the resolutions failing to mean now authorization of force has been declared by Congress. That's a misconstrual of that. So this would have simply just made clear its illegality. I think it is illegal. It's not authorized by Congress. The Constitution requires that to commence military kinetic conflict. The War Powers Resolution Act only required a permitted action for imminent self-defense. These resolutions both carved out an exception for imminent risk of self-defense being necessary. I haven't seen any credible evidence that Iran was about to attack us, the United States, that is. I don't confuse us with Israel. Nor was there, frankly, plausible evidence that Iran was about to attack Israel. They clearly had stayed patient during those whole massive military buildup. They were going to retaliate if Israel attacked them. And that's what, appears to have been the case in part, though we've got contradictory explanations from the White House as to what the heck happened and how it happened and why it happened. So I think it does. I think it's an unconstitutional war, and I think it's a illegal war. So this would have just made that clear. What was all but 2 Republicans voted against it. All but 4 Democrats voted for it, which was interesting. It shows the degree of fracture within the Democratic. I mean, the fact the Democratic Party no longer has much support for Israel or Israel's wars couldn't be better evidenced by the fact AIPAC could only get 4 Democrats to vote against this conflict. Only 1 in the Senate, John Fetterman. Thomas Massey and Rand Paul in the House and the Senate, respectively, voted for the resolution. The other House member who voted for the resolution is Warren Davidson, a great populist from Southern Ohio. He may even actually be the congressional representative of Vice President Vance, by the way. Old school populist, served in our military. Small businessmen, across the board. There were several other members of the Republican side that considered voting for it, but at the last minute backed off. And so we'll see. But the fact that out of the gate, that this is already getting Republican dissents and has almost Democratic unanimity against it, suggests the political vulnerability that the president faces going forward. That this does not have public buy-in. This does not have political buy-in. And that suggests that, this war, from a purely domestic political perspective, putting aside the geopolitical issues, the economic issues, the military issues in the conflict, just from a domestic political perspective, this is the most unpopular war at the time of its commencement in American political history. So both in terms of the vote in Congress and in terms of the public will. Now, there's a range of fake pollsters out there, including people that have either been intimidated in some cases or bought off in other cases, like Insider Advantage, like Trafalgar, others that are going to print fake polls. And as Tucker Carlson disclosed, the president is only listening to the fake polls. He doesn't want to hear anything contra. Similar to it's clear to me, 3 different Western sources have confirmed that, yes, in fact, the United States bombed a girls' school and killed 150 young girls. The 3 Western sources for that are Dropsite, Bellingcat, and the New York Times. 2 of those 3 are very deep state tied or aligned. Well, it appears what happened is the old map, as people have been, that apparently we're using AI to help with these things, which is its own disaster. But an old map about 15, 20 years ago, where the school is located was then part of an IRGC base. Apparently, we had not updated the map, maybe because of lack of intelligence, maybe because we're relying on AI, not sure. So we deliberately hit the school, but we didn't think it was a school. We thought it was an IRGC base. And that's why you saw Hegg's death say that, if he thought there was any chance we could blame it on Iran, he would already be saying that. Instead, he says, well, it's under investigation. It's under investigation. The president's out there just lying to people because he believes these lies. He only wants to hear lies. If somebody tells him truth, doesn't matter if Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the report has now been disclosed in the Washington Post, told the president this would not collapse the Iranian regime. Vice President Vance told him it would not collapse the Iranian regime. Trump didn't want to hear that. He wants to hear Lindsey Graham whisper nice little things to him. How are you going to be like FDR, Mr. President? How are you going to be like Churchill when you win this war? I mean, it's a degree of insanity that's just very dangerous. But we'll get to the next. In terms of impeachment and war crimes, the 2 are interconnected. We'll get to what the law is on those.
No, hold on. And the reason why I say I'm not fence sitting on this, I don't trust the New York Times, and they were specifically wrong about, as far as I understand, and even with all the information on the strikes in the hospitals in Gaza, what we're looking at here is the school is in rectangle in red, adjacent to the other target. And then the question is, did they deliberately bomb the building thinking it was a legitimate military target or legitimate for their purposes?
That's my understanding is a preliminary Pentagon report has already come to that conclusion.
Okay. Or did they know it was a school, decide to make the other strike?
They didn't know it was a school. At least my understanding from the preliminary Pentagon report, they did not know it was a school.
And some people are going to say
IRGC.
And some people are going to say that they should know that there's schools on military bases, much like there are in America or on American bases.
It shows you how we don't have intelligence on the ground in Iran. So Mossad had influenced certain places, but the degree of intelligence was far less than Israel presented to the president. So they suggested they knew that there would be an immediate uprising, that people within the military would immediately dissent, that the regime would be overthrown as soon as the Ayatollah was dead. They lied to the president. That's that simple.
I guess we're going on a spectrum of possibilities here. If they knew it was a school and they deliberately hit the school, war crime.
Extraordinary war crime. Okay. Yeah.
Then if they knew that it was a school, but they were going for the adjacent target and recklessly disregarded the safety of the school, also war crime.
Potentially, it depends on which law you apply. So here's the U.S. law, the U.S. war crime law. Now, there's an argument that certain Just Kogan's principles of international norms that we enforced at Nuremberg are also part of U.S. law. There's an argument that the law of war and the law of nations through various treaties and conventions, including the Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention, are governed by, because the Constitution references the law of nations, the Constitution references treaties being the supreme law of the land, even above the Constitution if signed. So there's those issues. But there's a specific federal statute that defines under Title 18, which is where our criminal code is located, Section 2441, and that's the war crimes law. And what it basically enforces the Article 3 of the Geneva Convention and the Fourth Hague Convention of 1907. And and this would apply to this school, but it also apply to other attacks in the region. Apparently, we're saying as soon as we know who the new supreme leader is, we'll murder them. There's issues there, obviously. But take, for example, one of the more high-profile recent incidents, which was attacking the Iranian frigate when it left Indian territorial waters.
And if I may,
and what happened there?
Let me and just flesh it out. People, you there was one comment that said, this is going to piss off. I'd say this is a divided issue, and this is not to be partisan. There's no partisan in this. People need to understand the facts, and then you can get angry with them if you want. When they bombed that warship, the Iranian warship, during my chat during the 3:00 show last week, someone said, and I didn't even know that this was the case. I didn't believe it when I first read it, that the Iranian warship had been invited to participate in war games. They had been participating in the war games, doing whatever military dances and presentations they do. It was not, they invited it out into the ocean. Is it? I don't want to say the
Indian Ocean.
Indian Ocean. And then as it's going back after the war games are over, they torpedo it out of the water. And then, so someone said that, it's like that can't be right. And it seems that it is right. And then, I don't have an answer to this question. I just said that prima facie something seems wrong about that, because that seems like luring out under the pretext of participation in a joint activity, so that you can then pull something of a sneak attack on an unsuspecting, unarmed, disengaged entity.
And then when the sailors were drowning, they refused to assist them and rescue them at all, and rejected and told India not to rescue them either. So let's go to the law. The law.
Well, actually, sorry, Robert. Just before we do that, can you steelman what the justification, why that would not be funded? Like, what the rationale would be from the Hegseth Department of War? Like, they say fair game, and that's it. We're at war, or we're not at war, but we're at war.
That's what they've said. They released video of the torpedoing, and they said, it's the first major frigate sunk since World War II, and they took credit for it as if it were a heroic action. And there were a range of people within the legal community that were shocked, people in the military community that were shocked, and I'll get to why. So the 18 U.S.C. 2441 criminalizes up to life imprisonment the efforts to attack, certain efforts that violate the Geneva Convention, that are grave violations of the Geneva or Hague Conventions, particular parts, Article 3 of the Geneva Convention, Hague Convention, the Fourth Convention, and I think it was passed 1907. That one of the things that specifies is concerning non-participants in hostilities and defining what that is. So non-participants in hostilities include armed combatants that are out of combat, either because of sickness, because of wounds, because of detention, or any other cause. And that if they are not actively taking part in hostilities at that moment, then they are, and including lawful combatants that are injured, if there's any further action taken against them that causes their death, it is a violation of the War Crimes Act under federal law, as well as those treaties and conventions that we are signatories to. The no active party, the requirement is you must treat them humanely, including the wounded and sick shall be collected and cared for under the Geneva Convention, similar under the Hague Convention. Now, we have previously, the U.S. and the prosecuted people at Nuremberg related to this. The Brits prosecuted people after World War II related to this, and it's the Laconia affair. So what happened was you had, during World War II, a ship Laconia got hit by a U-boat. People were, there were potential survivors that were going to potentially drown. The Germans' protocol up to that point was to rescue survivors. When they went to rescue survivors, American military operations tried to take out the Germans. So the Germans said, okay, no more of that. We're not going to rescue anybody. That order and its enforcement, the refusal to rescue people, even if they had been combatants, when they were wounded at sea at risk of death, was considered a violation of the law of war, violation of the Hague and Geneva Conventions, a violation of domestic law. And so they were prosecuted for that, including one general who actually went and attacked the people that were drowning. I believe he got the death penalty. Another one for simply saying we're not going to rescue surrendered people was put in prison in Germany for 10 years at the Nuremberg trials. So this is, in my view, a very hard to dispute how this is not a war crime. And what does that mean? Well, high crimes and misdemeanors under the impeachment clause of the U.S. Constitution. A war crime absolutely is a high crime and misdemeanor. So I think what Haig's death did was a crime worthy of life imprisonment, and he's out there bragging about it.
But for the fact that they invite them to participate in war games, they never have access to taking this military ship out, except with much more stealthy means.
They could have offered them the chance to surrender. They could have at least help the people not drown out in the ocean, or at least allow somebody else to do so. They did none of the three, and then they took credit for it and bragged about it. I mean, it's. I mean, they're out there putting whoever's running the White House PR account is some nitwit at the very bottom of the moral tree, out there comparing this to football games, basketball games, baseball games. Oh, look at all the deaths we caused! Woohoo! This is disgraceful, and it's anti-Christian, not Christian, and it's and yet the White House is deaf, just because Trump doesn't want to hear anything negative at all. Just now he's making up claims. Oh, the Iranian regime loves to cut babies' heads off and other lunatic stuff.
I know what he's
just
talking
losing
about.
his mind.
No, but when he says that, he's referring to the October 7 attacks and the proxy.
And even that ended up being proven false. I mean, a lot of those allegations were. You didn't have to exaggerate because of how many horrible things Hamas did that day. But it's. And by the way, that was funded. There's evidence from Israeli undercover journalists who've done a whole documentary on it, that Bibi Netanyahu helped fund Hamas through Qatar for October 7th to happen. You go further back, there's, Bibi thought there was a genius plan to empower Hamas to undermine the PLO. That's, so Bibi has more responsibility in terms of external actors for the existence of Hamas than anybody else. And I still believe there was some form of stand-down order for October 7th to have happen at the scale that it did. And again, Bibi Netanyahu's incriminated and implicated. And he is the leading indicted war criminal in the world today, is Bibi Netanyahu. So why we would want to go along with Israeli efforts, but Haig's death, is becoming a disgrace. He's like Team America World Police meets sociopath, and it's an embarrassment if you're an American that this kind of guy is running around running our military operations. Frankly.
Robert, somewhat off topic, but it's on this topic about the stuff that's coming out of the Department of the White House, Justice the American Way. This is a montage, and Ben Stiller in this montage, which included a clip from Tropic Thunder. The irony of Ben Stiller saying the White House doesn't get to use a comedy that we made about the atrocities of war in a video, promotional video. Says, hey, White House, please remove Tropic Thunder clip. We never gave you permission and have no interest in being part of your propaganda machine. Robin, am I wrong in saying that's fair? It's pretty much definitionally transformational and fair use, and he had no rights in any event to claim copyright infringement. Is my assessment mildly accurate?
I haven't thought about it from that perspective. So it's a short clip, so you have that aspect to it as well.
Yeah, de minimis use.
Very poor. Look, when you wage war, you want to do so regretfully, lamentably. You don't want to be out there celebrating it and cheerleading it like it's this great effort, especially when the we're killing more civilian. I mean, like I keep hearing people say, well, Iran is totally our own CENTCOM. Iran is being irresponsible with the way it's attacking. Well, the civilian death count is way higher on the U.S. Israeli side caused to Iranians than the other way around. So who is it that's missing civilian? Who is it that's being irresponsible? Who is it that's being reckless? The other problem is if you wanted a regime change within Iran, a good way to defeat any effort at that is to be hitting elementary schools and hospitals and local police stations. That's not a
I
way
guess,
to get that done.
and this will get us into the second part of potential high crimes and misdemeanors: desalinization plants and oil refineries. Now, so as far as I understand, there's no argument over the oil refinery. The only question is, was it Israel that did it versus America? There is maybe some, I don't know, Trump feigned not necessarily knowing if they struck a desalinization plant, but it seems by all accounts that they did. The argument's going to be, these are not civilian infrastructures, they're military infrastructures, because the soldiers need a drink and they need to get oil. Unfortunately, they seem to be critical infrastructure for civilians. And I know your answer is going to be yes, and flesh it out. This, in your view, is going to create exposure for potential impeachable and convictable offenses if Democrats ever get enough power and get enough rhinos who have always been anti-Trump and now have their opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the salination, the attacking the water supply, the desalination of water, because the Middle East is still desert, so that access to water varies. But you have some of the Gulf states and Israel heavily depend on the desalination plants. Iran does in certain parts of the country, but not all parts of the country. So the hitting a desalination plant is, in my view, a violation, is a war crime. Israel was busy committing more of those in southern Lebanon, hitting residential districts all over again. So they're back to that routine. And so you look at, so I think it is. I think it was. I think as a tactical matter, it's very dubious tactics, because if you make desalination plants legitimate targets, then Iran will retaliate in kind. And the problem is Israel and the Gulf states are far more dependent on those desalination plants than Iran is. So it's an escalatory ladder that we can't afford. So I think it's also poor tactics. Now, my understanding is the U.S., there's been these leaked reports that the U.S. did not authorize either the attacks on the oil because of this, not because of any war crime concern, because Haig's death has no war crime concern at all. But it's because of tactics. It's that the escalatory ladder, if oil refineries and water desalination plants are the legitimate subject of attack, that we are more vulnerable than Iran is. So that's the reason why it's a dumb tactic, and apparently we opposed it, and Israel did it anyway, because Israel has shown no restraint. This is what happens when the Biden administration imposed no real restraint on Israel, and then the Trump administration, for a period of time imposed restraint, but now since then has pulled back from imposing that restraint on Israel. You're going to get these kind of actions, unfortunately. And I think that, so I think are these acts impeachable? Yes, they are. They will have a plausible, probable cause argument for impeachment, and it'll only be the politics. And when you already have a House vote that was close to demanding the president immediately pull back forces, that was only a few votes away from winning in both the House and the Senate, that tells you that if Democrats just pick up a few House seats, pick up a few Senate seats, that Trump is going to be impeached and face an impeachment trial in the Senate. But so will others. Now Hegseth will be subject to that. And it was already the case that Bondi, with all of her other schemes, but now it's being detailed, all the pardon schemes involving Arthur Schwartz, shock, where people, Laura Loomer implicated as well, that, while she's out there pretending to be an independent influencer and calling for far investigations, she'd be the number one person on that list. She might want to look in the mirror. Well, if I was her, I wouldn't want to look in the mirror. But so if you look at those kind of issues that unfortunately the president is gifting the Democrats if you're a Trump supporter, a long litany of impeachable acts for his cabinet, key members of his cabinet, and for he himself. And if the war continues, right now, apparently there's talk of them preparing within the Pentagon for this war lasting all the way up through September. President's talking about how we have unlimited supply for a forever war. If that continues, I think both his political domestic base will erode, and he will be in a position where, I was trying to go back. I don't remember anybody ever being impeached for a war crime. So there are some of us that have long believed there should be, for George W. Bush and for some others. I think Barack Obama committed war crimes. I believe Joe Biden committed war crimes. I believe in terms of what happened with blowing up Nord Stream 2 of civilian infrastructure. But basically, the way to evaluate a war crime is it a non-participant? And just because they're military doesn't mean they're a participant under the various laws that are applicable here. And here, unfortunately, it appears we're not drawing that necessary distinction. The reason why the UK hasn't joined this is the UK's own legal, international legal team has said this war is illegal. And what's happening are clear war crimes. And I think that the president's putting himself in an increasingly vulnerable position, both legally and politically, if it continues.
Well, I mean, some people say England can't get involved in this because of their own demographic issue, and they would have their own uprising and issues to deal with domestically. The desalination plant, I saw a comment in our locals community which said Iran has 95, Israel has 5. Just double checking, it seems that there are 73 to 75 operational desalination plants in Iran and 5 major large-scale ones in Israel.
Yeah,
and so that if they start fighting that war,
Israel is about 1/10 the size of Iran. So I mean, just population-wise, I think geographically it's maybe 1/50th or something.
Yeah, Israel is geographically
Israel's
tiny.
a tiny, tiny country. Iran is a massive, massive country.
All right, well, let's get off the black pill stuff, I guess, Robert, and move into maybe some lighthearted stuff.
The president may wake up and do peace, pull us out, say, hey, we shouldn't have had these military bases in the Middle East anyway. I'm a born again Baptist, so I believe in deathbed conversions. So hopefully the president wakes to his senses and gets us out of this conflict sooner rather than later.
Well, at first it wasn't a war, and then it's a war, and then it's a short war, and now it's 3 to 4 months, and then maybe.
According to Mike Johnson, it's still not a war.
No, but he's literally said it.
By the way, Trump needs it to be to justify the actions that have all the other military actions that have taken. Right? If it isn't a war, then all of this is illegal. All of it's illegal, folks. None of it's legal. So you need it to be a war for any of it to be legal. The problem is under our Constitution, that required congressional consent, and Trump didn't get it.
Let me read a couple of the CombiTube Rumble rants. I won't bring them up. Only time Congress declared war was World War II. No time after, says Granite Man 62.
But they've done authorization of use of force multiple times since then that have been considered the legal equivalent to the declaration of war.
Granite Man says Viva in Comox. Comox band just gave 2-year notice to residents of Mobile Home Park to leave. BC native land grab has begun. Interesting. It's up in Canada. Christopher Walsh 6291 says if Trump had campaigned on regime change in Iran, then wouldn't Iran start expecting and preparing with their allies for regime change even before he took office? It's a good point, but are you then saying that it was a strategic lie to get elected and not tip off? No, policy decisions. He said it in 2016. You could have said it again in 2024. Wish we would all just get along. Try not to dominate and hurt each other, says Gorilla Strength Equipment. Theosis7171 says Kristi Noem's letting Corey Lewandowski screw her on the taxpayer dime. Meanwhile, the rest of us just get the bill without the happy ending. Well, that'll be a good. I'm going to get to the Rumble rants and the other ones. That's a good segue. You called it, Robert. We talked about it at length. You talked about the Lewandowski relationship. It wasn't just that she's a. Was it you that said you fundamentally can't trust someone who is disloyal to their spouse? I think it was you, but you can't trust someone who lies to their spouse, but maybe they have an open relationship. Then they just lied to God when they said, "Until death do us part." You can't trust somebody that has an affair, and it's true. And there might be many reasons that push someone to having an affair, and it's usually a symptom, not a cause of marital problems. You can't trust someone who can't keep their schmeckle in their pants until they get divorced. Lewandowski and Kristi Noem have been having what they call the worst kept secret or the open secret of DC. They've been stooping, and ordinarily that would be fine. Except she brings on Lewandowski as it was a special government employee or a non-governmental employee.
Special government employee.
SG.
De facto chief of staff.
She brings him on and is thus having sex with a subordinate, which is a problem. Ethically, maybe not legally, technically. She brings him on. Well, she took or authorized or used $200 million taxpayer dollars for her pro-deportation ad campaign, which featured her, which from what I understand, went through a variety of newly incorporated entities in which Corey Lewandowski has either, I won't say a direct, but has an indirect interest, and claimed that Trump had authorized it, which seems not to be the case. In her congressional hearings, pussyfooted around, the pun intended there, pussyfooted around, answering whether or not she's having a sexual relationship with a subordinate who's on the government dime, while appropriating or misappropriating $200 million in tax dollars for her own self-promotional ad campaign, going through her Stuppy paramour. And now she's finally out because it became too much of a problem. What in the name of sweet holy hell, Robert? And does she not have meaningful exposure for some fraud or corruption charges if they decide that she, in fact, embarrassed the administration a little more than they were prepared to be embarrassed?
So some of us have been warning for the better part of a year the Trump administration that Kristi Noem had chosen to treat the Department of Homeland Security as a personal cash register for Corey Lewandowski and their mutual friends, and including a range of no-bid contracts in the hundreds of millions of dollars that were given out. Some to promote her, to be a $200 million plus national TV campaign for her. So there was that aspect. But also there's been a bunch of other no-bid contracts that have been handed out. And if you think, oh, this is lefty media or something else, you can find Luke Rosiak at the Daily Caller, who is a right-leaning investigative journalist who has been reporting this in detail. About aspects of this. So it's been building and building and building. Richard Barris and I got wind of it back a ways when Democratic sources, ProPublica and others, Public Citizen and others, were building the big files. We got tipped off that they had already had the evidence. And so our advice to the administration at that point was, you got to nip this in the bud. You got to send her packing and Corey Lewandowski packing with her. And so she'd become the subject of a South Park satire because of all of her plastic surgery, that her face would fall off and they'd have to chase it around. That whenever she saw a dog, she would shoot him because of her bragging about killing a dog in her own memoir. So that she was a political, and then she was mismanaging, ignoring Tom Homan, ignoring others about how to do these high-profile raids in Minnesota. That there were people under her guidance that were giving misleading information on the law and on their internal regulatory guidance for use of force and things of that nature, for raiding homes without a warrant. So that they were doing all these things that were putting unnecessarily the president's deportation agenda at risk, political risk, legal risk. She had been very sloppy at how she handled the revocation of various temporary protected status deals. All she had to do was go through some very rudimentary, basic factual predicate fact-finding, and she refused and would just routinely just want a grandstand instead. That allowed a bunch of judges to set aside or enjoin or prohibit the removal of a lot of those people that were here under TPS status that exploded under President Biden. Mm-hmm. So she was just a disaster at every level, policy, political, legal, you name it. So we were warning for months and months and months. And unfortunately, the administration wasn't heeding it. But the Minnesota aspect and her war on Tom, she was behind a lot of the negative leaks on Tom Homan, accusing Tom Homan of things that she herself was doing in certain pay-for-play schemes. And the last Minnesota incident was the tipping one, where Trump realized he really needed to get rid of her. And he realized that they weren't going to be able to keep a lid on the investigations. They were expanding. Other people got wind on it. Democrats wanted to sit on it until 2027. But it was getting so big and broad. They were like, okay, we might as well go at this now. As part of their reason to continue to shut down parts of DHS, which to my knowledge is still partially shut down because of budgetary issues. So when she was in front of him, Senator Kennedy asked the question, this $220 million personal advertising campaign using federal taxpayer dollars, how was it done? She claimed it went through a proper bidding process. She just lied about that. That was perjury before Congress. And then lied again and said the president had personally authorized it. Now, she doesn't have that in writing. It may be the case that people around the president did green light this. It's not clear. There have been inconsistent and contradictory reports. But this is because people like Arthur Schwartz, people like Corey Lewandowski, people like Mike Davis have infiltrated wide ranges of the administration and are turning it into a personal cash register for their allies. And it's undermining the president's political power, political capital. It's diminishing his political capital and undermining critical agenda items of the administration. So at least she's out, Problem is, he put her with Rubio to be, viceroy of South America and the South American Shield or whatever that is, which apparently we're going to use as a predicate to invade Cuba next. Is that as long as he's still part of the administration, that they're going to use this to dirty up the president, and they now believe they can impeach people after they leave based on them doing it to Trump in 2020 and early 2021. So they'll re-impeach her. And as long as she's part of the administration at any level, which she still is, they can use that as they don't have to go through the legal fiction that they can impeach people after they're gone. They can do it anyway and use it as factual grounds to embarrass the president, to embarrass members of the administration in the White House who may have actually approved this at some level, and to further implicate the president in a negative way as part of the war crime stuff will be one part of the impeachment, but the more salacious, damaging one, I think, to his base, because Americans have long kind of turned a blind eye to American governments and politicians doing war crimes, to be blunt about it. It will be the corruption scandals. Now, the big one, if he doesn't take care of Pam Bondi in the same way he got rid of Kristi Noem and doesn't do it fast, that is the more explosive one. New York Times deep dive into all the pay-for-play pardon schemes, implicates Laura Loomer's getting paid under the table, apparently related to this, all connected to Arthur Schwartz, who has befriended Donald Trump Jr., who has used that. It potentially incriminates Donald Trump Jr. I mean, it's really bad. And if they don't nip that in the bud, that's going to be probably the scandal that may take him down.
Let me I brought up two tweets. They're both from January 24th, where you say, this is utterly talking about how Kristi Noem described the shooting in Minnesota. Noem is a complete failure. Admin should dump her before she gets impeached anyway. And the other one that you had to say also, this is from January 24th, was Noem is incompetent and corrupt. ICE being put in impossible situations. She has managed to turn the country into eliminating ICE altogether. Incredible incompetence only matched by Pamela Bondi.
But at least he's out. So that's she's out. At least she's not in charge of DHS anymore.
And
now the person they're nominating to replace him is kind of an idiot. So I don't know how much it will improve, but hopefully he won't be as corrupt.
So and I played that video of Mark Wayne Mullen talking about how he hugged Michael Byrd, the cop that shot Ashley Babbitt, and he said effectively he's the true victim. He never wanted to draw his gun. He wouldn't have drawn his gun, if it weren't necessary. Forgetting that Michael Byrd took his gun out and forgot it in a DC bathroom, was apparently a total bumbling idiot of a officer in any event. And he said this in July, which was well enough time after the Ashley Babbitt shooting ought to have known better. So he questioned his judgment. Is there any word on Pam Bondi getting the boot?
Not as yet. I mean, again, the president only wants to hear how great he is and how everything he's doing is great and awesome and how it's all going to work out perfectly and beautifully. Tucker Carlson disclosed this week. The Tucker was blocked from going down to the White House again before this Iran strike took place because Trump doesn't want to hear from anyone that will potentially basically relegated J.D. Vance through most of this week because Vance had warned him of this risk. He's been relegating Tulsi Gabbard now for quite some time. He doesn't want to hear anything that says, hey, this is a problem. So Kristi Noem blew up so badly, he had to deal with it. He should take the warning sign of the pay-for-play schemes involving pardons that implicate Pam Bondi in the Justice Department, and he should realize that that's only going to get worse. Wait till they fully dig into the various schemes and the antitrust, key tam, and civil fraud divisions, which it's even worse. It could blow up. I mean, the Iran war by itself might prohibit the Ellisons, the father and son, who own Paramount, who now own CBS, who have now bid and appear to have a winning bid, but it's got to get DOJ antitrust approval to buy CNN and to buy the Warner Brothers. The problem is two problems. One, key funders in that were a bunch of the Gulf billionaires, the Gulf oligarchs. And they're reconsidering that investment as they see their countries utterly undefended by our military bases that were supposed to be the quid pro quo. They, price their oil in dollars. They buy treasury bonds. They pay U.S. companies to build massive projects in their countries, and they invest massively on in various aspects of the equity markets in the U.S. Well, they're big investors as part of that purchase. They're already reconsidering whether they'll participate They're reconsidering, as certain billionaires made clear this past week from those countries, reconsidering all of their investments into the United States. That's how south and sideways this whole thing could go, as long as Iran is able to successfully close down the Straits of Hormuz and hit their countries willy-nilly anytime they want. And so those risks are going to continue to accumulate. But one of the other ones is that they're already investigating whether or not Paramount has undisclosed lobbyists on their payroll, people like Mike Davis, people like Arthur Schwartz, who have not properly disclosed that they were lobbying on behalf of Paramount to get this to get this deal that violates all the antitrust laws. Their purchase to both derail the Netflix deal, to buy it instead, and now turn around and greenlight this deal on the same terms that they objected to Netflix buying it, because no matter who bought it, it was going to create a de facto monopoly that would create major antitrust issues in the country. So you can imagine the scandal of all scandals, that you have Larry Ellison, his son, the president, all that could be brought down over that scandal, and in the process remove a political opponent of the Democratic Party currently from control and ownership of CBS, CNN, and major movie studios and television studios. So some of us have warned that this is a major risk. They do the smart thing. They should block the purchase by Paramount, by the Ellisons of CNN and Warner Brothers. But I don't think they will. That's why they removed Gail Slater. They removed Gail Slater because she was the last honest person in the entire Justice Department that's a political appointee. All the rest will play ball. And that scandal is just waiting to happen on top of all the others. And Democrats have decided that they might as well keep pushing it now rather than wait fully until 2027. They're leaking it to various members of the press, building their stories, and you're seeing just how damaging and damning these corruption scandals are. And it will again, make the Trump administration look like the second Grant administration in terms of corruption, and that will badly damage the Republican Party, damage the Trump 2024 coalition, and potentially empower Democrats for multiple election cycles.
This was from, I appreciate it's New York Times, and so you can't trust them when they say something that confirms what you thought. I just was looking to see where the reporting was on this, where they're reporting $500,000 went to right-wing operatives who claim to have worked with Laura Loomer, a social media provocateur who has the ear of Trump, to advocate for Mr. Schwartz's release. Another $100,000 or more was paid to lobbyists. And then there's a whole section here on Laura Loomer's.
They've been building this for months. We warned, Richard Barris and I warned the administration of this going back 6 months, that because we had got wind that this was happening, and that the Democrats knew it was happening, and that Democratic media and think tank sources knew it was happening, which meant this was going to be a shit show on steroids. And instead, it's like full BB. You got the personal corruption and warmongering at the same time. Never go full BB, everybody.
Robert, before we get into the next subject, let's go to Viva Barnes Law and get to some of the tipped questions. Here we got Kiki Blue says, so Noem being moved over to being Viswa, or like that means taxpayers are still paying her. Why can't they just fire her and Lewandowski?
That's what they should do.
Check is probably, we'll see if it's in the mail. We got Barnes continues to struggle to understand Article 2 and even an unconstitutional War Powers Act whose resolution failed in Congress last week. Blue CW Soldier says, is it possible
the problem with that is those that want to interpret Article 2 as the power to commence and declare war are ignoring Article 1 and everything our founders said. Thomas Jefferson himself went and got authority before he did affirmative kinetic actions against the Barbary pirates, because Thomas Jefferson understood what Article 1 meant. And there's a lot of people who are conveniently want to rewrite you have a lot of, when a conservative gets elected or a perceived conservative gets elected to the president, a bunch of these constitutionalists suddenly become living constitutionalists. No longer original constitutionalists. They become living constitutionalists when their guy's in power. The only thing I simp for is the Constitution of the United States. Not a party, not a politician, not a personality. It's the Constitution. And I maintain an originalist belief of the Constitution, no matter whose ox gets gored in the process.
Blue CW Soldier says, is it possible that a white pill from all of this is that Trump and most of his regime is impeached, removed? We get 2 years of J.D. Vance presidency with a new cabinet besides. No, I don't. That's not happening.
That be honest with you, probably right now, that's the best hope for
it's the best hope.
It's side, sadly.
Sadaka says, I'd like to thank everyone for the prayers and support. Unfortunately, my beloved Ben went into the arms of our Lord in the evening of March 4th. I appreciate your thoughts and prayers. This has been very difficult for me. However, I rejoice in the fact that I will see him again and that the 6 years of suffering are now over and that he is at peace. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
Tzedakah.
Our condolences for sure.
Hegseth and his ilk constantly brag about how precise their weapons are. So logically, when they take out a school, hospital, civilian, it's intentional. Now they're going to argue that it's a misidentification and it's intended to be accurate, but they misidentify. So bad
How long
intel.
have we been talking about how AI is unreliable, at least if you experience it in the legal arena? Why in the world are we using AI for mapping out locations to bomb? For the love of I pray that's not the case, but there's so many sources on it that increasingly it makes more sense than the alternative.
Sure, Barnes, let's pretend the war is unpopular with Democrats because of moral and constitutional reasons and not because of the get Trump tribalism. But even if that's true, Caliban, then don't give them reasons to impeach you. I mean, that's exactly the reality.
Right.
What happened to Grobert? See, everybody's pissing off everybody here. Grobert's citing Trafalgar and is obsessed with Tucker. Grobert is very much supportive of Israel, and Barnes is very much critical of Israel. And somehow I managed to maintain good relationships and friendships with both of them. Kim K. Trimbach says, I give no credit to the Democrats for voting for the illegality of the war. They are so partisan. The fact that Trump supports it is not true. Then he still should not give them reasons to impeach him. How can we get out of this mess that Big Don created? I think we've sufficiently tried to flesh that out. We're going to get to Rumble rants in a second. Robert.
Well, speaking of a law that could help save some things, the SAVE Act is pending before the United States Senate.
Yeah, well, what the hell's in the SAVE Act? Is there stuff about transgender surgery in the SAVE Act? I didn't go to look. You saw Trump's gaffe on that tweet where I get my foot in my mouth because I said there's no way anybody actually tweeted no transgender mutilation except with parental consent. And whether it was a joke, which I'm not convinced it was because there's an audio clip of Trump saying the same thing, whether it's the DC silo where you think that that's the acceptable caveat. Yeah, you could cut your child's penis off if the parents say you can, and no, it's not the same thing as circumcision, you idiots out there who want to treat circumcision like it's male genital mutilation. The SAVE Act's out there. Robert, what the hell is it? What else is in the SAVE Act?
So the almost I think 4/5 of what the president listed are not in the SAVE Act. So the SAVE Act has nothing in there about trans whatsoever. He unnecessarily stepped on his foot with that whole mini scandal, if you will.
So I was like, because first of all, I was like, if that's in there, we've got to go read the wording on it. So there's nothing about transgender surgery in the SAVE Act. I was asking, like, why the hell would? Okay.
Not only that, it talks about banning mail-in voting. There's nothing meaningful about mail-in voting in the SAVE Act. So the SAVE Act is a attempt to modify, in my view, very moderate, very modest approach that could be, depending on your perception of non-citizens' participation in elections, the consequential. But all it is something that is supported massively by not only the Republicans in the country, but by independents in the country and by many Democrats in the country. All it does is modify the motor voter law. Motor voter passed by Congress in the Clinton administration, 1993, which was meant to massively expand the number of people who registered to vote by having them automatically registered when they got their driver's license. Of course, as time has gone on, since many illegals, non-citizens can get driver's licenses, that has created a range of issues with whether or not the voter rolls represent only citizens. Now, constitutionally, Congress is given the explicit power to overturn or regulate or modify or amend state law and state rules when it concerns elections to Congress. Now, it doesn't apply to elections to the presidency. That is controlled exclusively by the legislature of each state. It doesn't govern state or local elections. But as a practical and pragmatic matter, whatever laws that govern elections to the House and the Senate are likely to be uniform with whatever the state and local laws are governing the presidency and local and state office. Because to create two separate whole thing would be kind of a procedural quagmire for the elections bureaucracy in each state. So what this is meant to do is to simply require proof of citizenship. And there's like 8 different mechanisms you have for proof of citizenship. There's even backups where people can take out affidavits if they have good reason to believe the person is a citizen, even if they can't find the proof of citizenship. So contrary to what some Democrats have said and what, the Brennan Center and some others have put out there, this would, and the amazing thing is some conservatives bought into what the Brennan Center was saying about how it totally undermined mail-in voting. Not really, to be honest with you. Its primary and principal objective is let's just make sure the only people who are even registered to vote, who are even allowed to get a ballot for mail-in purposes or to cast it at the ballot box, that they are in fact citizens of the United States, which federal law has long required. If you go through the Constitution, it references the right to vote, contrary to what some conservatives believe, I think a half dozen times. Now, that was done in the context of making sure ex-slaves could vote, people of certain age, people at 18 could vote, women could vote, people could vote independent of race, religion, nationality, etc. But it repeatedly references the citizen's right to vote, the citizen's right to vote. But note, it doesn't say everyone's right to vote, doesn't say the right to vote, it says the citizen's right to vote. So all this law does is something that is widely popular, broadly supported, anticipated by the Constitution. And in fact, each one of those constitutional amendments say it's up to Congress to pass laws to enforce this. So all they're doing is something that is completely constitutional, contrary to what some people have said out there. It enforces the constitutional protection of the right of citizens to vote. And if non-citizens are voting, my vote as a citizen is being diluted. Mm-hmm. Voter dilution is an entire theory of election law challenges. So this is completely constitutional, completely consistent with our legal history and political history from an original perspective, originalist understanding of the Constitution. And as such, should easily pass. Now, it won't fix the mail-in voting problems that still exist. It won't fix a lot of other problems that still exist. But at least will give people more confidence that the only people that are voting in the election are at least citizens. Even if they found other mechanisms of voter fraud, at least it's only citizens that are voting. That would be a nice improvement over our current situation. And yet, the senators like John Cornyn from Texas, who the president was thinking about endorsing.
Well, did he not endorse him back in September? Am I
No, he never did.
Remembering? Okay.
Not Cornyn. And so the Cornyn has long been a Trump hater. Said Trump should run in 2024. Opposed Trump. Said Trump should drop out in 2016. Didn't support Trump's election challenges in 2020. Wants to do mass amnesty. By contrast, his opponent is Ken Paxton, Attorney General Ken Paxton, who risked impeachment for President Trump, risked indictment for President Trump, stood by Trump through thick and thin, especially when he was under mass pressure. Ken Paxton has been the best attorney general in the nation for the better part of the last decade. A man who has been on Maha's side, took Dr. Bowden's side against rogue actions by his own Texas government in the Texas Medical Board. Someone who took on Pfizer, one of the very few people to take on Pfizer, concerning the lies about the COVID vaccine. An attorney general who the main reason certain illegal immigration didn't get pushed, wasn't as broad or wasn't as worse as it could have been under the Biden administration because of his successful legal actions challenging the Biden administration. So you're talking about a guy that's a true blue. I disagree with him on the war and some other issues, but this guy is as Trump loyal as you can get against as big a Trump traitor as you can get. And yet Trump was considering endorsing Cornyn because Chris LaCivita, who's getting all the money, who's making a fabulous multimillionaire, who's good friends with swampy Susie Wiles, chief of staff, who was shocked that the Straits of Hormuz was closed and the oil gas prices were going up. So she was running around with her hair falling out, saying, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? Well, I don't know. Maybe listen to some of us who told you that was going to happen beforehand. Maybe. I don't know. It's always tougher to fix something when it's out of the gate than before it's out of the gate. So that's why he's being, and so credit to Attorney General Paxton. He saw this, and the pitch was Cornyn will now vote for the SAVE Act or will vote to require a standing filibuster, and thereby the SAVE Act has a chance to pass. As long as he's able to extort the president into endorsement. So Pen Paxton comes out and says, here's what I recommend. I'll drop out of the race altogether in the runoff if the SAVE Act passes. All you got to do is pass the SAVE Act. That's all you got to do, Senator Cornyn. And Cornyn was like, oh, okay, no, we're not going to do that. They're still not going to pass that. So that is what has delayed the president's foolish, counterproductive endorsement of Cornyn. Hopefully he sticks to that. Hopefully he doesn't get dog walked by the deep state like he has the rest of his administration for the last 6 months, and endorses a man who stood by him all the way through in Ken Paxton. If Ken Paxton loses the runoff, if Cornyn wins the runoff, I think the only way Cornyn wins that runoff is if Trump endorses him. And even then, it's not a guarantee or locked in. But if he wins, he'll lose that seat. Republicans will lose that seat. Tallarico will be the next senator from Texas, the Democrat. And if somehow even Cornyn held on, I guarantee you he's a vote to convict Trump in the Senate when impeachment comes around. So it would be a massive miscue for Trump to endorse Cornyn, to get nothing in the short term and to get screwed in the long term. So let's hope he makes the sage decision. Unfortunately, these days, that tends to be more of a hope than a predictable, investable phenomenon.
I was going to say that there's a market for Paxton dropping out of the Texas Senate race. He's not dropping out of the race.
No, he made clear he would not. Trump was calling for whoever he didn't endorse to drop out. Paxton said, doesn't matter whether I get the endorsement or not, I'm not dropping out. But I will drop out if that shows you how patriotic Paxton is. He's willing to give up a personal chance to be the next United States Senator from Texas just to make sure this good popular law passes. That's who he is. We should be rallying to Paxton's cause, not be betraying the base again for Bushite John Cornyn.
Let me bring up, so we don't fall too far behind here. In fact, we've got to catch up. Cultivated Mind says, oh, no, here. You guys should have on Sybil Edmonds. I don't know who that is, but I'll screenshot this. Cultivated Mind says,
this week we are going to have, might even have some other special guests coming, maybe Tuesday or Friday. But on Wednesday, Senate candidate Mark Lynch, who's challenging that war whore, the queen of the war whores, Lady Lindsey Graham. Mark Lynch, who with Paul Dan's also challenging Graham. He'll be on 3 p.m. Eastern Time live with Viva and I on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, Brandon Weichert, who's written extensively. He's a harsh critic of the Iranian regime, but has been warning the administration of the extraordinary risk geopolitically and militarily of achieving the goal of regime change in Iran with his conflict. He's in the weeds. He would have been part of the Trump administration, but for the Israeli lobby blocking him because they were worried he wasn't enough of an Israeli loyalist. He'll be on with us Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on a couple of sidebars. And we might even have a third sidebar waiting to hear back from some people.
And I got, I was going to say Epstein. I got Mike Tracy on Epstein on Monday. And Tuesday, I do have the local farmer, Jake, from up the street. He's going to talk about what's going on for local farmers in Florida. And it might surprise a lot of you thinking.
There's Holocaust deniers and Michael Tracy. You can meet an Epstein denier. So
it's going to be explorative. I want to know what evidence it would take. And I have some other select questions, but it'll be fun tomorrow, 3:00. Now let me bring these back up here because this. Congratulations on the new pup, Viva. I didn't catch the name yet. Manny. We're going with Manny. The kids, they want ravioli or freaking, what's the other one? Macaroni, rigatoni, or ravioli. It's like, no food. We don't eat our dog. And Manny is a good name. He's the sweetest dog on earth. I'm just questioning his level of intelligence. He might be the dumbest dog we've ever had. So we got one disabled dog who's blind. We might have another one who's mentally deficient, but cutest thing on earth. And he's getting along with the dogs. I'm gonna post a video on Locals. They're the cutest things on earth. Randy says, what of the Russian connection to Iran and Cuba? Could this all be the U.S. taking advantage of Russian absence from the stage?
It's not. I mean, according to the Washington Post, Russia is helping Iranian accuracy in its targeting by providing the same kind of information that the U.S. has been providing Ukraine to target Russian targets. Russia is providing for Iran to target Israeli and U.S. targets. The Chinese are rather prominently providing detailed satellite images of all the U.S. military bases. That's where we were like, oh, these radars haven't been hit. That's totally false. And then the Chinese published a satellite showing those radars are gone. Billions of dollars. I think we're up to 10 billion, 12 billion, something like that. Trump wants to put another $200 billion at trying to ensure the various ships in the Straits of Hormuz. That's not even working. So the expense is going to go up. Yeah, gas prices are going to break $100 a barrel. They're up everywhere across the nation. This is not turning out the way Trump convinced himself it would. The temptation of most people in Trump's position is to double down. The smart move is a principle that is often forgot from Sun Tzu. When the enemy is stronger, retreat. Retreat. People forget that Sun Tzu principle. Attack what is weak, defend what is strong. But if the enemy is stronger, you retreat. You don't go into foolish martyrdom type campaigns.
I'll say you leave an off ramp, because if you leave no off ramp, you're forcing people to do cataclysm
to go to the wall.
King of Biltong says premium biltong from Biltong USA, high protein, keto friendly, no additives, US sourced beef, authentic South African flavor. Get some now at biltongusa.com. Use code, I think it's Barnes, so BARNES for 10% off. It's delicious stuff. Do it. Eric John Pizza, who makes pizzas that look like things. He's got his own channel. It's fantastic. Rumble has the best Sunday night lineup. Thank you. Disagree with your take on destroying Iran's navy, says Keefster. Don't like that we're fighting there. But but here we are. Thank you for not going to the same degree Kooky Candace did, though, and current military. Oh, I'm going to ask you that in a second.
It's not about attacking the Navy. It's about attacking a particular frigate under particular circumstances. Yeah. Issue one. The bigger problem is that we didn't, while they were drowning, we didn't rescue them or facilitate anyone else rescuing them. And that precise issue has been in the international legal world, including by the U.S. and the U.K., has been previously litigated and adjudicated to be a war crime.
And then Dominant One says, put some of Anton's firm and juicy meat in your mouth and prove you're a real man and you are not gay. Thank you. And then your women might like Anton's firm and juicy meat more than you do, but do not let her sit on Anton's meat. From Biltong, Dominant One, thank you very much. Robert, before I pull up the tweet, I don't even know if I need to pull it up. Candace Owen says, in part, a broad call, get out of the military if you're in the U.S. military. I saw that it could potentially violate two laws promoting sedition and affecting military activity in general. While you answer the question, I'll pull up the tweet so we can read it verbatim. Do you think that there's any, not even meaningful, do you think there's any legitimacy to the argument that what Candace did via that tweet could be potentially unlawful?
No, what Candace did, no. So she's not in the military herself, and is not a public elected official. So I was a little bit disturbed that there's organizations out there that represent conscientious objectors that apparently X suspended their account. But what they were doing is they're saying, here's the legal process if you have an objection under these circumstances. Mm-hmm. That's all they were doing. They were giving people the legal process within the rules of the military itself. They should not have had their X account canceled. And there were concerns because word leaked that apparently some commanders were going around saying that this was, God's will, that this was, part of the sort of apocalyptic dispensationalist belief structure that says, we need to put in the third temple, and that will. Some people were mad at me on our own board because they're part of the Shabbat movement, believes apparently in the third temple. I don't think they fully understand the dispensationalist version of that here in America is that they all die. FYI. He just manipulates it for political gain. But these are things that should not be happening. I didn't know Heg's death was a fan of this ideology. It's the idea that these people can dictate to God the timing of revelations. I find that heretical. I find that unconscionable hubris. I find that also in some cases, basically we're guided by people in the religious world that are either hypocrites or heretics. I don't believe that that's justified at all. But those soldiers complaining about that have every reasonable basis to complain about that.
The tweet itself is, do not join or remain in the United States military. Trump has betrayed America and expects you to die for Israel. There is no honor in being led by dishonorable men to your death. And people are clamoring, saying it's promoting sedition. And there's a separate provision of the United States Code where it's interfering with military activities in general.
That would be a violation of her First Amendment rights. So that those laws are interpreted necessarily in a very narrow way. So I don't see anything criminal or illegal in that. I don't share her beliefs, but I don't think there's anything illegal or criminal in it that could be constitutionally prosecutable.
Now, you might have heard a bell, Robert, because Medium Roast is now a member of the VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com community. Ginger Ninja made the Viva Fry bullet bill, and it's a beautiful creation. Welcome to the community, medium roast. You shall not regret it. What were we going to segue into from there?
Well, we've got Trump tariffs, we've got SCOTUS, we've got refugees, we've got a range of topics.
Let's do because when you said the Chinese are providing detailed maps, and I'm like, I wonder how they got that info. You remember we once covered the case? It was drones, I think, it was indoor. The Bumblebee drones or something that was surveilling insides of buildings and transmitting the information to China. I was like, and I didn't know. It's like, okay, what's the big deal? They get detail. They can tell you what's inside buildings, and they know where to strike, whatever. With the Google glasses, which are they Meta? They're Meta glasses.
The Meta glasses, yeah.
They look like Ray-Bans. They're kind of cool. I bowl with a guy who uses them, and I think it plays music. I don't even. They look cool. They record, and it's something that I've always wanted. It was like, record this because I see funny things and cute dogs, and I don't know if I ever see a gator attack a bird and I don't have it on camera, I'm gonna flip out. So they're transmitting the video feed to whatever unverified, unsupervised, unlicensed third parties in like India and foreign countries, so they can have all of this info. They can record and see in your house, your bathroom, your bedroom, everywhere, and they get this info, and they told you that these were safe and secure and that they were not sharing your information. And some pervert out in Bangladesh might be looking at you taking a dump in the morning, if that's what they're into. What do you make of it, Robert? I mean, it seems if the allegations are true, not just a violation of privacy, that's a national security threat.
Yeah, I mean, you see Zuckerberg was at the UFC this weekend?
No,
I guess he's trying to train himself. How'd you do pick-wise, by the way?
6 of 12, but it all depends on the. I go with some underdogs, and 6 of 12. I'd say a monkey throwing a dart would do just as well as me, but it was fun to watch. Max Holloway, I love it, but yeah. So,
but man, he got taken down by the grappler, the Brazilian grappler. I was watching and I was thinking, I just always got to bet on the Brazilian.
I have one theory is always it's going to sound mean. You bet against the Chinese fighters, you bet on the Brazilian fighters, and you bet on anybody who comes from a country that ends in stan, because typically they are on another level when it comes to the grit that it takes to win. But that being said, there's always whatever. It was great. It was a great fight night.
Well, so so Zuckerberg was there, but I noticed he wasn't wearing any of his Meta glasses, maybe because he knows what it's recording all the time. So this was prominently pitched and promoted to people in advertising. Quote, it's designed for privacy and it's controlled by you. Turns out both were lies. That in fact, it's going through their servers, going through foreign servers, being routed around the world, being preserved and kept in where God knows where, of everything that's going on all the time. Kind of like Siri was always listening in. The glasses are always watching. And so a class action suit has now been brought for unfair competition, for false advertising, for a range of state law claims under the state of California against Meta. And hopefully it's successful. But once again, big tech is revealed for the big criminal scam artists that they naturally are.
It's wild. No, I love it. You wonder, like, if China has got if they have those glasses, and I don't know, they must have protocol in areas that require security. But it's amazing what you can actually get access to by way of information. All right, Robert, let me get to the list here and see what we segue into now. You want to do the SCOTUS decisions?
Sure. We also have we have TikTok, DEI, Uber, psychic libel, sleepy gummies, refugees, tariffs, and SCOTUS.
Hold on a second. Come on, what was the second one you just said there?
Tariffs or refugees or TikTok or Uber?
No, TikTok. No. Okay, so TikTok, because this is one we covered back in the day where they passed that piece of legislation ordering the divestiture, the breaking up of the divestment of TikTok, because it's a Chinese national security threat that is algorithmically targeting our youth so that they become brain dead, brainwashed, and useless on a military front. Order to divest so that it would be under control of American control. I remember some people at the time saying, well, it's going to be under the control of intelligence, so someone's going to be spying on you regardless. I remember at the time there was a market. That's right. There was a market on Kalshi for whether or not Trump was going to save or prevent the divestiture by the time frame within which it had to be done. And it looks like, I mean, he's going to, but through other means. He is being alleged to have corruptly interfered with the divestiture and now sort of transmitted or transferred the assets of TikTok to related entities that have been big donors and members of the MAGA movement, or at least big donors to Trump. Or I think it's Oracle being one, or being the big one.
Yeah, it's Larry Ellison is one of the principal parties and part of the purchase. So the federal law passes, and the federal law doesn't provide a carve-out. Doesn't say the president can, at his will, decide not to enforce this law. Supreme Court affirmed its constitutionality, which I had some doubts about. But the main point was that China's ByteDance had to divest entirely and have no more functional control. That isn't what's going on, because the real value of TikTok is that ByteDance created algorithm. That's what gave them their market competitive edge. So Ellison comes in to buy it up. They're mostly changing the algorithm, but still working with ByteDance to do it, to basically make sure there's as little anti-Israeli social media presence on TikTok as possible. Some people had asked, I saw in the chat, about why they haven't seen more footage of what's going on in the Middle East. Real simple. There's massive censorship by Israel. Yeah, you can go to prison in Israel for disclosing any video footage of any attack that takes place on Israel. It's CNN admitting this live. Oh, we can't disclose what we just saw here. So mass censorship in Israel. But this was meant to manipulate. They took Richard Barris's data that they were losing the younger generation on the issue of Israel versus Palestine, or Israel in general, and Bibi Netanyahu in particular, who's deeply hated in the United States now in terms of approval ratings. And instead of saying, hey, maybe we should change how we're going about our argument, change maybe some of the policies we're incentivizing the Trump administration to pursue, they're like, oh, we just need to control. It was the Obama solution. We just need more censorship. We have more censorship, then all these problems will magically vanish. And so they get Ellison to come in and his son to buy up TikTok, while they're also buying up CBS, while they're trying to buy CNN, while they're buying Paramount, while they're buying Warner Brothers, to try to control the whole media apparatus. And the problem is, when people saw this, the original TikTok law, several started out competitors. And so those competitors are now suing because they have standing, because they're going to be economically damaged by Trump unilaterally saying that Ellison can ignore the federal law about divestiture of ByteDance entirely from the TikTok app. And so that is now pending in federal district court. So we'll see how it goes, but it looks to me like they have standing to sue. That was always the question. Who would have standing to sue over this? But, what Trump did is not consistent with the statute. The statute didn't authorize him to carve out, say, hey, if one of your donors on behalf of Israel wants to own TikTok, you can just ignore the law. That's not in there.
Well, especially whether or not people agree with that statement of yours, this whole issue with TikTok came to a head specifically at the time when the algorithm was feeding anti-Israel or critical of Israel information. So, arguable. Here, DTQT says, movie suggestion: Le Déclin de l'Empire Américain. That was a good movie. I saw that back in the day.
Ooh, the Decline of the American Empire. Interesting.
Yeah, it actually has. I don't remember it have anything to do with America. It was a French-Canadian movie out of Quebec. I think it was out of Quebec or French. So either France or. It's a good one. And then they had the sequel, which was, I forget the name now. Thank you, Robert, for your principled stance during these difficult times. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for unblocking me, Robert, says Quo Vadis. Dr. Steve Turley, the lesser, is now a whole hog war whore. Is he some kind of deep state Q-style commenter? He's hard to listen to.
I think pressure, whenever war comes about, there's mass pressure on those on that side of the aisle politically, that whichever president is waging the war, to shut their mouths and get in line.
Well, he's also...
I've been through it for forever, since I was a kid. I've been protesting war since I was 17 years old.
This is not to accuse him of being a shill, and there's no but to that. He's a Fox News commentator. I don't know who in Fox News is remotely skeptical, let alone critical of the war. So you can understand why people...
You're going to see a lot of people capitulate to the war. Hunter Thompson, I always thought, put it brilliantly. I think for the first Gulf War is when or maybe it was the second Gulf War, he said that whenever the war bugles scream, I go out on my back porch and I put Wagner on the record player, and I get out my .38 and I shoot into the darkness and hope that I hit something evil so that I can feel no guilt. It was a brilliant retort to the war horse.
Cynical RN says, where and when can we get the Bourbon with Barnes baseball hats and hopefully T-shirts? I think that's going to be on 1776.
Soon. I'm hoping we're going to have an announcement on a special Amish outing with Amos Miller's farm on my birthday, April 11th. That is forthcoming this week. And every time I think I got everything aligned on my calendar, so something goes sideways in terms of preparatory planning for the website and other stuff. But that is in progress.
Oh, and by the way, everybody, hold on. Let me bring this out. I forgot to mention this. If you're watching off the landing page on Rumble, click into the video because it's better. Click the subscribe because you'll get subscriptions and notifications. And don't just watch it on the landing page of rumble.com. Come on in, click on it, and give it a thumbs up and drop a comment. And then just a couple more because we're going to not fall too far behind. How can we get the big... Oh, Robert, can you please have on Good Logic to talk about the Greater Israel Third Temple, says Sam... Low 226.
Well, he's and generally probably. He comes from the Orthodox tradition that sees Zionism as heretical for the tradition of Judaism. I know he's for the war, but I don't know what his thought process on the Third Temple is. But I was highlighting not Shabbat. I was highlighting the dispensationalist evangelical tradition, of which I'm very well aware, but is much more of a minority amongst active evangelicals and is popularly believed, that thinks we should use Middle Eastern conflicts to induce the apocalypse and bring back Jesus, which I find not only incredibly dangerous, but also pure hubris and heresy, that people think they can dictate to God's calendar.
Booma, it's not a Booma, says, how do we get out of this mess that Big Don created? I think we covered that. Now we got on the bottom here, Chris Kraft. Trump has spent billions striking Iran. California could have built 0 miles of a high-speed rail. And hey, Viva, I feel betrayed. I've been a member since close to day one and never got the bell. Well, this only became the welcome to new members when Ginger Ninja made it for me when I went to visit. I think it was when I went to visit Ginger most recently. How about the guy who hacked the Chinese Roomba? 7,000 were hacked at once. That's wild.
I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting.
Back in the early 2000s, Siebel Edmonds was translating Arabic communications for the FBI and uncovered a number of communications. Well, let me screenshot that.
FBI buried. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we got to Ithaca 37 Cato. I hope you can talk about this guy's U.S.-Iran war. Oh, I hope you talk about this guy's idea on how to bring the U.S.-Iran war to an end. I also hope you talk pros with the summary. Iran's merchant marine is vulnerable. The U.S. could get at the jugular of Iran by seizing Iranian commercial tankers. The U.S. could keep the vessels and the oil down at the American base in Diego Garcia.
I mean, I think the bigger problem is that both nations can continue to be offensively effective, but not defensively effective. And the problem is in that escalatory conflict, you can wipe Iran off the map. What else do you wipe off the map in the process?
Kiki Blue says, if they pass the SAVE Act, then someone should point out that only happened by Paxton's input, and therefore he is smarter than the current Senate and thereby endorse him. And Ithaca 37 Cato says, is it true that 47,000 files have been deleted with no explanation? I'll have a look. I haven't heard about that.
They've been busy deleting Epstein files. Particularly, I plan on getting it out this weekend. But my Rothschilds Hush Hush is forthcoming. That's one of the files they're busy delete.
Is there any truth to the story going around that Scott Bessent is asking global investors to buy into United States dollar assets because of this war?
He's asking them not to panic. There's about $11 trillion invested in treasuries and U.S. equities by the various oligarchic regimes of the Gulf states that are currently wondering why they did that if they're not going to be defended from attack.
Mm-hmm. On Saturday, Alex Jones revealed a strategy some, quote, insiders used to gain access to DJT when surrounded by gatekeepers, targeted local Fox News ads in whatever market he happened to be in at the time. Maybe a tactic a VBL community can fund and use. Who's with me? So Noem, okay, I got that. All right, now, what do you want to talk about, Robert?
We got tariffs, SCOTUS, refugees, and a range of smaller topics.
So the tariffs, I mean, you'll feel, we talked about this the other day where the day that the Trump tariffs, or the tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court on a going forward basis, set aside what happens on a retrospective basis. Trump then invoked these other provisions of law and said, now I impose another 10% additional tariffs across the board under this other provision, which we and you at the time predicted would face the exact same legal scrutiny, which I presume is the case right now.
Yeah, so two things happened. One, a court issued immediate refunds of $166 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So because the president did not, unfortunately, take the advice that was proffered to him to reinstate retroactively those tariffs by offering as a quid pro quo, if you will, the elimination of the individual income tax on 95% of Americans, which the 1776, there we go. Oh, it's always opposite. 1776 Law Center National Survey showed was deeply popular in the Republican base, but also with large parts of the independent portion of the country and even a decent number of Democrats. He didn't choose to take that path. And because there's no effort at all to legislatively, retroactively greenlight those tariffs, they now have been not only struck down, but refunds have been ordered in about $166 billion, for which, we're already massive deficits. So it's not clear where that money's going to go.
Well, now I want to go look through this article, Robert. But so here we got 2 court rulings this past week shifted the tariff refund debate. A refund of $166 billion. What percentage of that is owned by the interests of Cantor Fitzgerald, or do we not yet know?
We do not yet know. We don't know how much money the Epstein files Howard Lutnick, who lied about his presence and connections to Epstein, how much his sons might line their pockets, and other hedge fund folks, including some of these other big, like Paul Singer is a big Wall Street player. A lot of these Israel First donors, Bill Ackman, are very much Wall Street players and participants. And so you can't rule out that they're lining their pockets with Trump's decision not to undo the refunds by getting congressional authorization. The second problem is, as we foretold last week, that the Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 was not the most useful tool or technique to try to reimpose global tariffs. Because one, the Trade Act, that section was meant for balance of trade relating to currency issues that were peaking then in 1974, not to deal with trade deficits anyway. And secondly, the law doesn't mention the word tariffs anywhere in the statute. And then third, it's never been used for tariffs. In other words, it has all the same problems of the tariffs that just got struck down. Well, now a bunch of states and other parties have already filed suit challenging this. Don't be surprised if a court enjoins any further use of the tariffs very soon. So the tariffs may be DOA within a month or two.
But and Congress is not moving to remedy this through congressional
Trump is
acts.
doing nothing at all. Congress would never do anything. Trump was going to, unless Trump coerced them to, and Trump did not.
All right, I'm curious to know what percent. We know that Cantor Fitzgerald bought up. I don't know. It was
at least $10 million worth. We don't know how much more. They were pitching everybody from the get-go, but I'm sure people connected to the White House are lining their pockets with the tariff refunds in one way, shape, or form. That I have no doubt about. We just might not find out about it for a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road.
All right. What's the immigration case where there was a a discretionary denial of inadmissibility waiver that was taken to the Ninth Circuit, Robert. So I had to look it up. These words were all relatively new to me. And it's sort of these double reverse negatives where there was a discretionary denial of a waiver of inadmissibility. So an individual, his name was South American. I'm not sure exactly where he's from. Chavez? Wants to come to America. It has something of a criminal record, but I don't know that we know what his criminal issue was. It was possession of drugs potentially or something. And the custom borders, whatever the CBDCS, they can say we a discretionary waiver of inadmissibility. You're inadmissible, but we're going to waive that inadmissibility to, I don't know, be nice. His name was Vera Shairez, and they did not waive the discretionary waiver of inadmissibility. He took issue with that, and the Ninth Circuit says it's purely discretionary. They get to approve or deny at their sole discretion, and you have no recourse if they issue a decision that you don't like, and you're not allowed to pursue further your visa application for these United States of America.
Yeah, this is about the constitutional authority and the congressional authority the president has long had over controlling our borders. The Supreme Court has long identified it's an inherent power of sovereignty to control your border. To Trump's old point, you don't have a country if you don't have borders. So in enforcing that, Trump took the action to immediately suspend a wide range of global refugee programs. This was before he went out there and said, we'll let all the Iranians who want to come here, come here. I was like, what? Hold on a second. Well, I didn't know that was part of our immigration policy. The Islamists, come on in. I'm sure there's no people who would commit terror in that group. None at all. But the back before this, before that statement, Trump had taken action to limit refugees pouring into the country, and including cutting off certain spending in support of it. Went up, the district court prohibited it, said, no, this Trump can't do this. He's out of control. He's a and the Ninth Circuit correctly overturned that decision. As one of the concurring justices noted, this is an imperial judiciary, and we must be wary of an imperial judiciary, and we cannot become an imperial judiciary in the name of preventing a so-called imperial executive. So given Congress had specifically delegated broad authority to the executive branch, it's even may whether you have to, you don't, there's no shalls in most of these statutes about refugees. It's may if you even want to let them in, if you even want to go through a certain process, if you want to spend any money on it, all, et cetera. So the Ninth Circuit correctly ruled that I like this quote, constitutional choreography. I'm going to steal that down the road. Between the different branches of government. We got to make sure this dance conforms to that constitutional choreography. They did. They noted that Congress had clearly delegated power to the executive branch on issues of excluding asylum seekers into the United States under a wide range of circumstances. And the president's actions conformed to that. And so consequently, that part of his presidential power over controlling our borders has been, in my opinion, correctly affirmed.
Amazing. Let me bring this up here because I just saw it in our Viva Barnes Law community on the bottom. No, I have to go like this here. Hold on 1 second. Refresh. And it came from Gray 101, Robert. So you know where it's going. Tipped. Mr. Barnes, what are the odds Operation APAC Fury finally ends in 2029? That's 3 years from now. Blue CW Soldier says this is the annual reminder that the nerds of geeks and gamers are attending MegaCon in Orlando. They are having a meetup on March 21st at Universal. Y'all should join.
Oh, so anybody say, yeah, geeks and gamers, Nerderotic, all those guys, those are great folks.
How do the courts have the authority to order the executive branch to disperse funds? Doesn't this have to come from the legislature, same as the That's
one of the ongoing issues in these debates. But I agree with you that they don't have the authority to do that.
But they're not asking. Is this in relation
to this particular case? It was they agreed that the executive branch could decide to spend or not spend.
Cliff Norman asks, why did Iran attack civilian areas of the Gulf states, hotels, etc.? Seems like a strategic blunder.
No, what they were attacking is our U.S. military had moved off of its bases and was shifted to new locations, in some cases inside hotels, to operate. And that's what they took out. So far, the civilian casualty rate, at least that I've seen from all sources, is that we're killing 10 times more civilians in Iran than Iran is killing anywhere else.
Chris Kraft, thank you very much, Chris Kraft, says, I'm working on a phone logo for the Barnes Barris consulting effort. Lord have mercy consulting, Robert Barnes and Richard Barris. The numbers do not lie. That's fantastic. The Mark Twain quote defines what Robert is attempting to convey. Loyalty to the country always, loyalty to the government when it deserves it. Indeed. And I got those there. All right, which one do we want to segue into now?
We got a lot of SCOTUS. You want to go to SCOTUS?
Yeah, okay, yes. You might have to field these, though.
No problem. So the first one was asylum. So it's related to this refugee case we just discussed. And this is what standard is there. And what standard does the Board of Immigration Affairs apply? And then what standard do the appellate courts apply in reviewing the decision of the Board of Immigration Affairs? The persecution provision comes from the statutes. Basically, Congress says that when someone can get and seek and obtain asylum in the United States. Now, some of these asylum rights are derivative of various treaties and conventions that we have signed. And remember, under the Constitution, treaties that are properly approved and authorized in this country, and those passage of the Senate, et cetera, those are the supreme law of the land. And what it requires is that the asylum be a well-founded fear of persecution, and that fear of persecution be based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular group, or political opinion. This poor individual was dodging a hitman. But the immigration officials determined dodging a hitman he wasn't dodging a hitman because of his race. He wasn't dodging a hitman because of his religion. He wasn't dodging a hitman because of his nationality. He wasn't dodging a hitman because of his membership in a particular group. And he wasn't dodging a hitman because of his political opinion. Consequently, they identified typically asylum is really what the government is doing, not what private actors are doing. But if the government can't protect you from those private actors in some instances, that becomes a ground for asylum. the immigration officials determined that this particular instance did not qualify under the law. And the question is how much deference is due to that decision with the Board of Immigration Affairs, the Appeals Court, and the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court made clear that under the statutes, that authority is very broad, and there's a lot of deference given even to so-called mixed questions of fact and law. They said even though the definition of persecution is a mixed question of fact and law, that determination is due substantial deference by the courts because Congress intended it as such. And so the Supreme Court, it reinforced the broad ability to restrict what I think have often been, someone who has done asylum cases, a misuse and abuse of asylum law by pro-immigration, open borders advocates under the Biden administration. So good affirmation by SCOTUS.
Had they ever used the asylum yet effectively or even indirectly on environmental refugees?
Not to my knowledge, and that would not meet such a standard in my opinion. Though what you're referencing is there's a separate statute for humanitarian crises. Okay. So those are people who usually obtain temporary protected status, and that's still going through the legal system because of all of Kristi Noem's mistakes. Now, the second one was, when does a state have immunity? Now, in my view, there should be no such thing as sovereign immunity. The idea of sovereign immunity is anti-constitutional. It comes from the idea that the king can do no wrong, and the reason why the king can do no wrong is because he's appointed by God. That is, our Constitution is against that very premise. However, the courts have decided to extend and expand and license all kinds of immunity, including, of course, for themselves. But that has been so misused and abused over the years that now and then courts start to realize this is not popular. As part of that 1776 Law Center nationwide survey, we found that overwhelming support for ending all immunity for all government officials when they violate people's civil rights and civil liberties.
What would go into eliminating immunity? I mean, you have, is it a legislation that's going to annul the
at this point it would have to be legislatively enforced because the judiciary refuses to. But in this instance, at least, they recognize the limits. So in New Jersey, they created the New Jersey Transit as a separate corporation. So it's state funded, state empowered, but they said it's a separate corporation, including in the authorization of the law, that can sue and be sued. And yet, when their bus drivers kept running over people, they said, "You can't sue us for that. We're part of the state. We got sovereign immunity." And the Supreme Court made clear that the law has long been, to quote them, that even though that you have to be an arm of the state, and being a state corporation is not being an arm of the state. If you have a separate entity that has separate sources of liability and recovery other than the state treasury, and you have language like sue and be sued in it, then you do not have sovereign immunity as if you're the government. So it was a very good decision restricting the sovereign immunity and this attention of these state-created corporations to extend and expand their immunity in places it was never intended at all, even by the court's generous interpretation of immunity to begin with.
Robert, I'm going to give everyone a link. Come to Locals. Give everyone a few minutes to do that before we go raid out and carry on the rest of the party. We got, I want to talk about the Kalshi. I think, do we do Kalshi? Maybe we'll end with Kalshi. What do you got?
Yeah,
one more Supreme. Sorry.
Yeah, we got one more Supreme Court case, trans in schools. We got DEI getting struck down in California, no less. We got the psychic libel suit. We got the Uber suit. We've got the sleepy gummies and Kalshi left to cover.
Okay, now I want to, before we go, come over to Locals, people. We got convened standing military legal justice system, peaceful constitutional rescue of innocents must be convened in higher authority than immune. It says exile the Knights of Malta, and I can't see the rest of that name. I'm not exactly sure what that means. If Trump had campaigned on regime change in Iran, then wouldn't Iran start? I already got that one. And then I'm just trying to make sure we don't miss it. You should have on Sybil Edmonds. Okay, I got that. I think if I missed any of the CommiTube super chats, Miss Scusi, come over to Viva. So Robert, do one more here, and then I'm going to give everyone the link, and then we're going to go figure out who to
the
rate.
last SCOTUS case over at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. If you want to troll, you got to pay the toll, so put in a tip. If you want to be supportive, critical, or simply have a question or comment at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And we'll get to it in the after party there. We'll cover DEI, psychic libel, Uber getting nailed for their schemes, and sleepy gummies plus Kalshi. When is it gambling? When is it a prediction market? But last but not least here, the last SCOTUS decision of consequence this past week was about, this was a case we covered, where this involves the schools in California trying to help trans kids to transition those kids. I'll give Thomas Massey, he had the funniest tweet of the week. When Trump originally put up that it was okay to do gender mutilation as long as the parents approved, and then he realized he was getting such blowback from Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, he went back and took that part out. And Massey posted, man, this post transitioned pretty quickly. So, which was great. But so this was about trans. So what's happening is parents were being kept in the dark when kids were wanting to trans at schools, including demands that the schools use the kid's preferred pronoun against the parents' explicit instruction and without the parents' provided consent or even awareness. Went up on the shadow docket to the Supreme Court at the injunctive stage of the case, and the Supreme Court enjoined, and he reinstated the district court injunction that had been invalidated by the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit granted a stay, undid that stay. And they pointed out that this is two issues. It triggers religious discrimination accommodation requests by the parents, and they're likely to win on that claim against the statute, and the fundamental right to control your own child, fundamental right of parenthood. This these provisions clearly intruded and invaded and infringed that without meeting the compelling interest or narrowly tailored means that strict scrutiny requires when those two constitutional rights are at issue. So there were three justices who issued a concurring opinion: Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Roberts. Alito and Thomas would have gone further. They would have invalidated every aspect of the law right out of the gate, whereas Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson dissented. Gorsuch just joined the opinion but didn't, write anything himself. So that to me is the correct law. This is insanity what they're trying to do. Trans kids in secret at public schools in violation of people's religious rights and parental control rights. So the good decision by SCOTUS this week in that context.
All right, now we're going to go raid. Is it Matt Morse TV? If you haven't had enough, it's Matt Morse TV. Iran promises doomsday. USA versus Iran live coverage. If you haven't had enough of the Iran discussion yet, go raid him. Let him know from whence he came. Say hi. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, I'm going to have on Mike Tracy. It's going to be fun. Tuesday, Jake, farmer from up the street, talking about agriculture in Florida. Wednesday and Thursday, Robert Barnes and I are going to have sidebars. They're going to be phenomenal.
Have one on Friday as well.
Okay.
And then on tomorrow, I'll be live with Richard Barris. What are the odds at noon Eastern time? And it looks like around 1:30 we'll be on the Charlie Kirk show, discussing this and other issues as well. So
that'll be good to get a different perspective on Charlie Kirk.
They had some young college students that are at Appalachian State, which is not far from me up here in the Eastern Tennessee, as well as another student from another university. And what they expressed was that young Republicans, young conservatives, young people on campus overwhelmingly oppose this Iran war and see Israeli influence as being disproportionate and too much.
We got Happy 30-06 Day, which I get is I'm March 8th because I'm not that much of a boob. Dropping whatever the crosshairs settles on since 1952, says Alien Baby. Gray 101 says, will Trump be driving out remaining traitors like MAGA, like Senator Rand Paul and Massey? That's sarcasm.
That's from Gray 101. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. We're going to do the Kalshi. We're going to do all the other stuff. Come on over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And if you're not, you're losers. I'll see you tomorrow. That's a joke. Go raid Matt Morse. I think Salty Crackers live. Eric John Art Pizza or Pizza Art is on. So you got plenty to watch on Rumble. But vivabarneslaw.locals.com is the place to be. And that's where we're going right now.